Connor Bedard is a generational prospect. Yes, generational, meaning once in a generation. He's a phenom poised to reinvent hockey and bring glory to a desperate, down-on-its-luck franchise. Just like the last guy, and the guy before him, and all the other generational prospects we've had in just the past few years. The term might as well have lost all meaning, as we see it assigned to virtually every heralded young star across sports. Does this mean that the Chicago Blackhawks rookie is overhyped? Maybe or maybe not. He could end up being just as amazing as the billing dictates. Regardless, his rise helps explain what has become a well-worn trend, the hype cycle of a rising star. It is universal and consists of distinct stages not always well aligned with the natural development of even the ones who do live up to the expectations. By falling into the trap of the hype cycle, we create undue pressure on young players, set ourselves up for disappointment, and pump ourselves up on false hope to the point we are too exhausted to appreciate true greatness when it actually does emerge. The lucky thing about the hype cycle, though, is that once we know how it works, we see it everywhere. Only by recognizing this predictable pattern as it unfolds can we resist falling into it, allowing ourselves to appreciate players like Connor not for the overplayed exaggerations surrounding them, but for the excitement they bring to the games they play. The first stage of the hype cycle is the trigger, the inciting event that puts the world on notice to the next big thing. Connor's came at just 13 years old, when he was interviewed for an article in the Hockey News, which touted him as the future of hockey, a heavy mantle for a kid who had yet to graduate middle school. While nobody could realistically know what the future would hold so far out, the recognition was for good reason. Connor had put on display an exceptional level of talent during his youth career playing at the North Shore Winter Club in North Vancouver. After scoring countless goals across the various age group levels, he went over to the West Vancouver Academy to play bantam-level hockey. In his first season there in 2018, he at one point scored hat tricks in 5 consecutive games and finished the season with a league-leading 88 points, which drew the attention of the hockey world. From this moment, the legend of Connor Bedard was born. Part of the trigger seems always to be the Herculean origin story, and by this I mean a well-reported and barely believable episode from early childhood that illustrates how the rising star is simply built different. The Greek hero Hercules famously strangled 2 snakes who entered his crib as an infant, foreshadowing his godlike strength. Connor was never attacked by snakes, but he had many such moments. He picked up a hockey stick at the age of 3, and would carry it around the house practicing stick handling while tearing up the floors. After getting on the ice for the first time as part of skating lessons with his older sister, he surprisingly hated it. But then, once reunited with his beloved hockey stick, everything changed. Even when he couldn't get to the rink, he would famously spend hours each day wearing inline skates and shooting on a small goal set up in the driveway, until one time he broke a window and had to relocate to the backyard. When the Bedard family went on vacation to Hawaii, Connor brought his hockey gear with him all the way to the tropical paradise, hoping to find a rink and participate as a guest player for the local rec league. One time he even broke his right wrist, spent 12 weeks practicing exclusively left-handed, and somehow improved his shooting once the cast came off. Connor's love for hockey knew no limits, and this aspect of his personality formed the basis for the hype cycle.
I don't pay much attention to the background noise. There's lots of stories about great players that haven't lived up to that.
Soon after the trigger comes the ascendancy of expectations. As the prospect continues to improve, onlookers continue to prognosticate about all the great things that might be next. Connor's success at the bantam level earned him the distinction as the 7th player ever to be granted exceptional status in the Canadian Hockey League, allowing him to participate in the WHL as only a 15-year-old. Joining a list that included Connor McDavid and John Tavares, the Vancouver native was in rare company. Drafted first overall by the Regina Pats, he looked to hit the ground running in 2020. After a short detour to Sweden for ice time during the WHL's pandemic pause, he debuted for the Pats in 2021 and earned Rookie of the Year for the shortened season. His first full WHL season in 2021-22 saw him exceed 100 points, just the 3rd time ever a 16-year-old had accomplished the feat, and the first in several decades. Aside from the numbers, Connor's game featured an element of flair, his highlights exploding online and popularizing his signature toe drag release. At the same time, media outlets were quick to label him not just as a future NHL star, but as the greatest prospect in recent memory and the surefire #1 pick in a draft still over a full year away. While he wouldn't become eligible until 2023, that didn't stop coverage of the 2022 draft from being overshadowed by coverage of Connor. NHL teams began to strategize about how bad they would have to be in the coming season in order to select him, some entering early rebuilds just to compete for the right to draft #1. As the hype surrounding Connor continued to grow, every game he played became a mini spectacle. Despite playing for a rather uncompetitive team, his games attracted crowds of thousands, hoping to get a glimpse of Canada's next hockey superstar. He finished the 2022-23 season with 71 goals and 72 assists, leading the entire CHL in scoring. The teenager, all things considered, handled the spotlight well. His impressive humility demonstrated that he took nothing as a given, and remained willing to prove himself each and every day. In an on-ice interview after leading Canada to gold and winning MVP at the World Junior Championships in 2023, he bristled at questions focused only on his individual performance, preferring to give credit to the entire team. In the lead-up to the 2023 NHL Draft, when asked about how he would take the league by storm, he reminded an exuberant reporter that first he had to make the team. It's easy to think about how in previous generations, top prospects could skate by without having to deal with such an excessive spotlight. But the reality is that now, in our ultra-connected world, greatness doesn't go unpunished.
It's different now. I mean, I think no social media, then people wouldn't really know much of who I am.
As the expectations ascend, they inevitably do so to an unrealistic level, no matter how much a player accomplishes. Repeatedly living up to the expectations as Connor did only serves to inflate them even more. When the Chicago Blackhawks won the 2023 draft lottery after one of the worst seasons in franchise history, Connor, their presumptive pick, was cast as the savior that the downtrodden team needed to reclaim its place among the league's best. Once simply compared to superstars like McDavid and his childhood idol Sidney Crosby, the conversation had now shifted to whether he would become even better than either of them. His official selection in the June draft brought with it the expected media circus, and hockey fans could barely wait for the start of his rookie season. When it did start, Connor's first game for Chicago drew the most viewers of any regular season game ever televised on ESPN. After scoring his first goal in the NHL in his second game against Boston, commentators quickly compared him to Wayne Gretzky. His home debut carried with it an average ticket price of $209, the highest of any Blackhawks game over the previous 5 years. TV networks seemingly have started assigning a dedicated cameraman to keep a close-up on him from puck drop. Compounding all of this is the rookie standing as a marketable young star playing for an American team, an enticing proposition for broadcasters and advertisers hoping to accelerate the popularity of hockey in the United States. When the hype seems to reach a fever pitch like this, it means the cycle has arrived at its first and highest peak. This is the inflection point at which expectations have reached such an unrealistic place that any performance, no matter how outstanding, can only be a disappointment. This is probably the most terrible part of the hype cycle, and it's already starting with Connor. Because fans and the media expect him to amaze every time he steps out on the ice, whenever he doesn't, it raises all sorts of questions. Is he really as good as we thought he was? Is he ready for the NHL? Does he have it? All of these questions are obviously both stupid and premature. Not only is the sample size too small to make a judgment, but the development of a professional athlete plays out over the course of years, not the course of games. However, this doesn't stop the articles and posts comparing his stats to lower drafted rookies, and the debate about whether the confidence in him was misplaced. After the peak of expectations comes the trough of disillusionment. As a player repeatedly fails to live up to the projections which have been set at an unrealistic level, even if he plays great, the hype surrounding him dies down. How much it dies down depends on how well the player performs. If he performs well enough, he can maintain some attention, though it will likely never match the level it reached at the peak. The limited attention span and insatiable appetite of the sports machine has moved on to the next big thing, usually another unproven yet skilled young player who can reinvigorate yet another hype cycle. But the first player is still there, only now the world seems to have forgotten about him. Ironically, this is when the player usually starts to improve, and even approaches the impressive levels the hype suggested at the start. If you think about all of the current NHL superstars who were once top picks, how many do you think are as talked about now as they were at the time they were drafted? The answer is only a few. Those who are see the attention come in infrequent bursts, rather than the constant deluge typical when a player is the next big thing.
I'm not too worried what someone I've never met kind of comments on my game or whatever. For me, it's just trying to help the team win.
Connor, it seems, is largely oblivious to the hype cycle, or at least uninterested in it. Whenever he is asked about how he handles the pressure that comes along with the constant attention, he replies with a few familiar refrains. For one, he has been dealing with the spotlight since he was 13, so it's nothing new to him. Over the years, he has developed the ability to cope with all the noise without letting it affect him. Moreover, his attention is fully focused on getting better, and he constantly dissects his performances to see what small tweaks he can make in order to improve. Lastly, he simply loves hockey, and takes pride in having the opportunity to earn a living doing what he loves. In his own words, he feels fortunate to get to go to the rink every day. Since Connor has insulated himself so well during the build-up, the comedown likely won't get to him either. When the narrative shifts, he might not even notice. Perhaps this is the crucial quality for a highly touted star to fulfill their potential in an age where the norm has become to hype up young players before they have had the chance to do anything, only to tear them down for that same crime. Being elite requires even more focus and mental strength than in previous generations, when disingenuous voices could be easily segmented into a 30-minute media session.
Thank you.
Don't be surprised if in a season or two, Connor starts to come into his own as one of the best players in the NHL. When and if he does, the hype will start to build a bit again, but probably nowhere near as much as the first time. Eventually, it will level out at a plateau of productivity, a level which brings along recognition but a lack of spectacle. This is the true tragedy of the hype cycle. When a player finally follows through on the promise shown at the start, the attention has largely dissipated. More serious fans will no doubt appreciate the greatness on display, but the broader audience, drawn in by the outlandish proclamations, has lost interest and won't come back. It turns out that in pro sports, we tend to fawn over players for what we think they can be rather than what they actually are. Our excitement over imagined potential overshadows that of real-life performance, no matter how amazing. Luckily, Connor doesn't seem to care. His focus has never been on the hype. He worries most about his own game, and won't get sidetracked by the outside voices. As he continues to improve, it's on us to recognize him for it. Our challenge is to escape the hype cycle. Our challenge is to keep on watching.